Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge. This week, my weekly wrap-up of reading, booktube things, YouTube things, issues, social issues, anything I really want to talk about. Today I want to start off with something I saw over on Noah's channel, Everyone Who Reads Must Converse, and that was 5 perfect books discussion that he did video. I'll leave a link to it down below, and he kind of put in parentheses tag question mark, and I'm going to put in parentheses tag exclamation mark, because I think this is a great idea for a tag because it doesn't really ask any questions. It just asks you to, come up with a list and maybe make a video in which you discuss 5 books that you think were perfect. Now, importantly, and Noah emphasized this as well, importantly, these don't have to be your 5 favorite books. I'm not asking for your 5 favorite books. As a matter of fact, if you look at my list, only one, I think, of my top 10 books of all time is actually in this list of perfect books. It's not asking for your favorite books, it's asking for books that you thought were perfect. And it's going to let you and define perfect book however you want to. So you don't have to take my definition, you don't have to take Noah's definition, but I just think this is a great idea. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce it as a tag today here in my Saturday Hodgepodge and kind of weaponize, as Steve Donahue says, an idea I saw somewhere else. And hopefully I'm going to tag some people, and hopefully this will spread, because this is one of those things I think can lead to some interesting bookish discussions. I want to thank Noah. Please go check out his channel. So my 5 perfect books. All right. So my number 1 perfect book is Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. So this is essentially a semi-autobiographical story about James Baldwin's growing up in African-American neighborhoods in New York City in a very religious family, but a religious family in which his father was abusive, in which his family was beset by violence, in which his family's history going back to the South was also part of the story of how they got to New York and why his father became a preacher. It also involves his kind of awakening awareness of his homosexuality, and it just is, I think, note perfect. It is an unsettling, angry, incredibly informative, very personal, powerful reading experience where you feel the fear of the main character's ancestors as, groups like the Klan sweep through the southern countryside, killing people and injuring people. You feel the fear instilled by a lynching. You feel the frustration of a young man kind of forced into a religious system which he has reason to doubt, living under an authoritarian, totalitarian father, and at the same time kind of dealing with his own spiritual and sexual awakenings in an incredibly complex family story. It is just perfect, and it really really made me feel what I thought Baldwin was feeling, and it's the first James Baldwin book I read, and it made me wonder why I had waited so long to read anything by James Baldwin. So that's my first perfect book. By the way, that's not my favorite James Baldwin novel or book up to this point. My favorite to this point is Another Country, which has flaws, which keep it from being on this list. So my second perfect book is W.G. Sebald's Rings of Saturn. So this is one of those books which I believe I mentioned in my video about books I love, but I don't really know that I understand. This is one of those books. This is one of those books which I just kind of describe as magic. On the surface, it is a memoir in which the author laid up in, W.G. Sebald, the author laid up in the hospital, is remembering a walking tour he did through Suffolk in England, and remembering the walk and the places where he went, but also then that triggering memories of other subject matters, subjects he looked up from, 17th century kind of doctor philosophers to dowager empresses of China, to the silkworm industry, to trains, to fishing industry on the coast, to World War I. It is just replete with all these references. And when you're reading it, it is tempting to think, oh, this is just some guy meandering through his memory. But as you read along, things start to fall into place. And you realize what Sebald is doing is he is questioning the problems of memory as we remember it historically, the way in which places trap and reflect memories of where they used to be, memories of how these things affected the author, memories where the author isn't sure if he's remembering something he thought or that happened to him that actually somebody else happened to somebody else or somebody else wrote about. And you really start to get this idea that what the novel is, I think, questioning or highlighting on is this kind of impermanence of memory, this impossibility of really knowing, of only being able to know through our perceptions. And it's just one of those perfect magical novels for me. The third novel I think is perfect is Tim O'Brien's In the Lake of the Woods. Tim O'Brien's far more famous for his more directly Vietnam novels, the things they carried going after Cacciato. But this novel, which does involve a Vietnam veteran, is somewhere between an incredibly intense look at how events in the past affect the present, and also kind of almost like a literary thriller. The main character is a Vietnam veteran who participated in atrocities that took place in Vietnam. He's come back to the United States, begun a political career, only to have that political career be ruined by his tie to these atrocities that took place in the past. And the story really centers on the disappearance of his wife, and we are left to wonder what happened to her. Did he kill her? Did she flee on her own? Are they going to rendezvous somewhere else? Is this all a way to get away from the harsh glare of the publicity tied to his political career and these events in the past? We get his perspective. We get neighbors' perspectives. We get townspeople in the area where it took place, which is the Lake of the Woods in far upstate Minnesota near the border with Canada. It is just an incredibly intense and I think near perfect kind of psychological thriller / intense work of literary fiction, and I think it's nearly perfect, and it is my favorite Tim O'Brien novel. My fourth perfect book is Reading Turgenev by William Trevor. This is usually, for whatever reason, put together with another novella-length book written by William Trevor, the famous Irish short story writer, novelist, in a book called Two Lives. And the second one of those books is, I think, My House in Umbria, which I found to be unreadable. But Reading Turgenev is, I think, just a perfect gem. And really, it's 225 pages long. It could be a book all on its own. I don't know why it has to be tied to the My House in Umbria. But what Reading Turgenev is about a young, well, it's about the life of a Protestant Irish woman who lives out in a small community in which there aren't a whole lot of Protestant Irish men for her to marry, who kind of rushes into a marriage with a local businessman, moves into his home with his two, well, there's a word for what his sisters are, but his two really nitpicky, harsh sisters, and she learns immediately that marriage isn't what she thought it was going to be, that her husband isn't capable of giving her the kind of relationship she wants, and then her meeting up with a sickly cousin of hers, her falling in love with that cousin, the cousin dying after kind of an intense type of love being created between the two, and then her becoming obsessed with that and her being committed. Anyway, I won't give the whole plot away, but it is I think the best example of Trevor over the course of a novel doing what Trevor does so well in his stories, and that is kind of exploring the quiet kind of desperation and pain that lots of people deal with in their lives, and the ways in which they come to grips with that, the ways in which they learn to live with that, and the damage and the impact that has on all kinds of people around them. And it's perfect. William Trevor, by the way, is just one of the great writers in the English language, if not in the history of the world. And he has this way of making small things feel universal, of making you feel what the characters feel, in a way which I think is really unique. So while I like William Trevor's short stories much more than his novels, I did think that reading Turgenev, which is a part of the book, publishes 2 lives. You can skip the My House in Umbria part, in my personal opinion. But that novel-length novella, I don't know why it's published the way it is nearly perfect. And then the last book I have, my 5 perfect books, is Beloved by Toni Morrison. This almost goes, I think, without saying, but what I would say is that Beloved does just a great job of making you feel the terror, the soul-crushing life of enslaved people, the fear they lived with, the lengths they were willing to go to gain freedom, the awful forms of cruelty in which slavery took place. It makes you feel the relationship that took place between people enslaved on plantations and how that affects their lives afterwards. It makes you feel, the grief of a parent who makes an awful decision, how that haunts her and her family and her future life, how that affects her other children, her other child, and it is so beautifully written and so powerful and so atmospheric that you can feel what the characters feel. You can see the home in which the characters live. You can see and visualize the characters and the place they live. You can see the townspeople and the roads, and you can smell the food they're cooking, and it's just an incredibly powerful, perfect novel. And as I've said many times before, it is the greatest novel written by an American, I believe. So it is one of my 5 perfect books. There you go. They're my 5 perfect books. So please do this as a tag. If you're watching this video, no matter how big your channel is, Steve Donahue, or no matter how small your channel may be, I think this is a great tag idea and a great idea for a video. So please do the video. The other thing I want to talk about are just YouTube related issues, just some thoughts I have about YouTube in general. I've noticed, and Sina and I, from beating about the shelves, had a discussion on Voxer, a really brief discussion on Voxer, about YouTube deleting comments. And I've noticed this happening. I've had several people, Richard McRibbon, JB Subscribes, who I've seen their comment, but before I could go and respond, it's been deleted. And I just want to say, if you've responded to left a comment on one of my videos, and I haven't gotten back to you with at least a heart to indicate that I've seen it and read it, then I'm sorry that those comments are disappearing. Apparently, the YouTube screening process is trying to screen out more and more inappropriate comments. And on the comment of mine that was deleted from Sina's channel had to do with the book she was reading about sexual abuse and sexual assaults on young women. And perhaps their algorithm is really, or their screening is really sensitive on those issues. And I can understand why. We have to accept that here on YouTube we live in a world where a lot of people are doing things, are using YouTube and the image and the videos on YouTube to do things that are incredibly inappropriate, that are criminal, in fact. And so while it frustrates me when YouTube does this, and I'm not saying any of you who got, please, oh my goodness, I'm not saying anybody who got their comment deleted is guilty of anything awful, but maybe they have the sensitivity turned up on that thing that filters through comments so high that even completely innocent things, which all the comments I've seen that got deleted, which I didn't get to respond to, were completely innocent, but maybe they have it turned up so high that they are deleting comments. And maybe it's something else. YouTube is a corporation, and it can do what it wants to. And our terms of use, which we agree to when we sign up for an account and we make videos, is completely up to them. We literally live in their world here. And the only solution to not being happy with it is to go somewhere else, and there really isn't a lot of other places to go. But I do understand if that's what they're trying to do, because I do think YouTube is in a difficult position. The issue of monetizing videos for channels that are too small to monetize, that is just pure capitalist greed. They are literally making money without paying the workers, and that I'm not particularly a fan of. But again, it's their world, and they get to do that. This week I've continued my buddy reading. So I have read and will be checking in with Kim from middle of the book march about Oscar and Lucinda. I've read our 100 pages, and I have to say that this second 100 or so pages for me was much better than the first 100 or so pages. It felt like this story took a long time to get going, but now I'm really comfortable with it. I don't want to leave any more comments here before I get to check in with Kim, but it has grown on me in lots of ways. There are some issues that Kim and I have talked about, and I'll leave those to her in her video if she wants to talk about them. But there's that. Also continuing my buddy read with Patrice Jones of Swimming in a Pond in the Rain, the George Saunders book, which really is a book about writing. It's kind of a guidebook or an advice book or a how-to book about writing short stories. That is just a great buddy read. Patrice is just the queen of buddy read. She is just the best. She is so diligent and thoughtful, and she brings up so many issues, so many quotes and passages she wants to talk about, and I'm always overwhelmed by how much work she's done in the buddy read. I always feel like I'm not quite living up to my end of the bargain, but that has just been a delight. I have enjoyed that very much. It is, and I think I might have said this last week, in a sense like taking a writing course from George Saunders, who is a award-winning, published, successful writer, and I think his insights and the way in which he goes about talking about breaking down stories with an eye towards writing is really good. And also, Jack, Rambling Raconteur, and I will be checking in on Sunday with our second section of John Dos Passos' 42nd Parallel. I made a video on Thursday, a brief kind of biographical sketch, really brief biographical sketch with just some of my own ideas thrown in there about why Dos Passos kind of faded from public memory in lots of ways. But that's going well. I'm enjoying it, and particularly enjoying getting to talk to Jack about the book on Voxer. He and I have check-ins on Sunday, but both of us end up, sending one another a Vox in the middle of our reading with thoughts and ideas that we have, and that's just been really enjoyable. I was a little stressed about all these buddy reads and stuff like that that I had to do this month, but it's just been really great. I did finish a book last week. I finished John W. Thomason's World War I novel, Fixed Bayonets. That's not a particularly good book. Its interest would be, I think the only people who would really find it interesting or worthwhile are people like me who have a real interest in World War I literature written by former combatants, which is a fairly niche area. But I read it on my Kindle. It was relatively cheap. I'm glad I read it. Thomason, I think, is an interesting person. But I don't think the book was very good. He wrote more books than that, and I may try to pick up one of those and see if his writing got better. But if you are really interested in World War I, that would be in fictionalized versions of the combat experience, and in Thompson's case, I would say lightly fictionalized versions of the combat experience, then that might be a book to pick up. But that's also part of my 1900 to 1950 read-along that's being hosted by Katie at Books and Things, so that book fit within that. One of the things I've been watching a lot, and I've mentioned this before on YouTube, is I've been watching channels in which I've been watching narrowboat channels. Narrowboat channels are channels run by people who live in narrowboats on the English Canal system, and they cruise around and they show the scenery and the life of living on narrowboats. And this really fits right in with a bizarre interest I have, which was in tiny houses. I know Matthew from over at the Mayberry Book Club lives in a tiny house, and I drove my wife crazy with this idea of us selling our big house and moving to a tiny house to save money and to save, on effort and cleaning and yard and stuff like that, and she's just outright rejected that. So now I've gone to fantasizing about living on a narrowboat in the canals in England. I am well aware that the channels make it look a little bit better than it probably is. And I'm also will tell you that without going into too much detail, the toilet situation on narrowboats is enough to make me never actually want to do that. And probably the same thing is true with tiny houses as well. But I did want to do that, and I'm going to link to two of my favorite narrowboat channels down below, just in case you want to watch some relaxing video. One is called Cruising the Cut. I think I've linked to that before. But I found a new one, which is called the Cafe Boat, or Holly the Cafe Boat, which doesn't sound like it's a narrowboat channel, but it is. And there's a young couple on there who is essentially turning a narrowboat into a floating cafe where they make coffee and desserts and serve ice cream. So they can cruise along the canals doing that. And, I know it's popular among people my age to look at millennials. I think that's this couple qualify that. Just kind of shake my head at their laziness, their entitledness, and I promise these two young people are just delightful, and I think they're they're better exemplars of, or they're exemplars of the kind of millennials who actually exist, like my own daughter and son-in-law. And other young people that I know, that the stereotype really isn't fair. Also, yesterday was a nice, cool morning, and I went over to a neighborhood near mine, and I went for a walk, and it was just delightful, so I ended up making a walking vlog, which I'm going to leave here. You can watch it if you want to, but I had a really good walk, and so, I made one of those things where I walk around, I put music to it, and that starts right now. Okay, well, as always, look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and thank you for watching.